Welcome to your Wordless Podcast, the space where we redefine success, self-worth, and transformation. I am Nick Nieras, the soul-centered architect of transformation, helping you unlock your highest potential and build a legacy beyond limits. Now, whether it is self-mastery, career breakthroughs, or wealth creation, this is where change begins. Now, let's dive in.
As you already indicated, I was born in 1940. So very quickly, you would notice that I'm 84 years young, and I was born at the beginning of the Second World War in the northeastern part of Holland, within 10 or 15 minutes from the German border. And obviously, the dictator called Adolf Hitler had decided in 1938 that he would invade Poland, make part of Germany, and after doing that, then decided to invade Western Europe, including Holland, with the Blitzkrieg. And so my dad, as you already indicated, was drafted. Well, my mom and dad were married in 1938, I should say, and they were in love. And so they had rented a house, a beautiful little place for them, and fairly quickly they had two children, a boy and a girl. And then in April of 1940, my mom was pregnant with me, and I was born November the 1st, 1940. My dad, however, everything changed with the start of the war. My dad was drafted into the Dutch army in April of 1940. The last they saw him was in Rotterdam before it was bombed, and thousands of people died in the early part of the war. The reason that the Germans bombed it, the Dutch didn't surrender quick enough for their liking, and they wanted to set an example of bombing this big city, the downtown of it, in early 1940. So that's the last time we saw it, and for 5 years, they would not know if he died or survived. So therefore, for my mom, still being pregnant with me initially, and then the two kids, it became extremely difficult. And so for me, the first thing that I remembered is when I was 3.5 years old, we had hundreds of bombers overhead that were bombing Germany. The Allied forces had decided to bomb Germany, in particular, where they were building weapons for the war. Again, remember, I'm in the northeastern part of Holland. Right next to it, the western part of Germany, close to the north, is close to us, relatively speaking. My mom would take us outside in the evenings in particular and see the sound of hundreds of planes, of bombers. I will never forget. And the reason that she took us outside is because she felt safer outside than inside. And in the distance, we could see cities burning, the sky be red, and cities like Bremen, Wilhelmshaven, Kiel, Hamburg, all of those cities, and the distance, the whole sky would be red. The next thing that I remember is that in 1944, the Germans had cut off all the food that flowed into Holland, and it was hunger. A lot of kids and old people that were vulnerable died because of starvation. And for us, me then being about 4.5 years old, and my brother and sister 1 year and 2 years older than me, every morning we would go into the railroad yards with gunny sacks, pick up anything edible and burnable. I still can now, even 80 years later, I can feel hunger still, how it felt, so, and then the winter, and the reason that we did as kids is because the Germans wouldn't shoot us, but they put us one, and the following day we'd be back again with sunny sacks and pick up anything edible and burnable. There was no fuel either, obviously. Then the winter of 1944-45 was the coldest on record. And I still remember the cold, the hunger, and then they had a little fire, a little stove, and that was in a little small room that we were heating, and was really hot in the front, very cold in the back. And so I still remember that part. Then, obviously, as you already indicated, we were liberated by the Allied forces that had landed in Normandy in the summer of 1944, in June of 1944, and the different sections made their way into Europe. Canadians, being part of that in the U.S. and others, they landed and made their way through France, Belgium, Western Holland, to the top of Holland, where we live, to push the Germans out. So things got pretty rough, and the Germans, had virtually nothing left, blew up all the bridges behind them. One of those was in front of our house. And I still remember that being underneath in the crawl space below our floor, with pillows on my head, when they blew up the bridge in front of us. But at the same time, when the Canadians made their way into our village, and, we saw far too much that we should not have seen, dead bodies, people being shot, and all those kind of things went along with it. So, so then, obviously on April the 12th, the Canadians liberated our hometown, and I still remember that. And they had a small section of the Canadian Red Cross Army behind our house, and every morning we would go there, although we didn't speak English, but we did in a way. We called everybody Johnny, and they made us bread with butter and cheese, and the butter and the cheese was bigger than the bread, and it was amazing. And so I knew from that time forward that when I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. So I wanted to go when I was 17, but in Holland, they still had a draft. So when you were 18, you had to go for 2 years into the Air Force, Army, or Marine. And so I was in the Air Force for 2 years. And, so then after that, I left for Canada when I was 23 years old. I wanted to start with nothing. And so academically, I was not a success story either. In Holland, I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. Then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? Some people said, send him to the mentally challenged school. They said, no, we're not going to do that. So we'll teach him a trade. He said, let's make him my dad had a friend at a furniture factory. Let's make him a furniture maker at 12 and a half years old. So I got a job being a furniture in a furniture factory at 12 and a half. And so I liked wood. My grandfather was a master carpenter, and my dad worked in the lumber industry. And so that always stayed part of my life. And so the other part is that my dream was to go to Canada to prove to myself more than anybody else that I was just as smart as all my friends that went on to college and university. And kids can be hard on each other. So when, for the third time that I failed grade 7, they all say, no, he's too dumb, to this, to blah, blah, blah. But I never, and my parents didn't believe that, and my brother and sister didn't. But I knew also that I was just as smart as anybody else. Not smarter than or better than, but I had to prove that to me. And so I decided to go to Canada in 1965, July 1965, and I wanted to start with nothing. So I took a baggage, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and very little money. And so made my way, flew to Montreal, took the plane or the train across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights. My God, it's a big country. Landed in Vancouver.
4 days? What? 2 days?
Once the immigration office in Vancouver.
Oh.
Fortunately, there was a German fellow there, and I could speak no English, but I could speak a little bit of German. I told him I wanted to build a sawmill. And he said, go to Prince George. That is 12 hours by bus north of Vancouver, 500 miles, 800 miles. And as I came off the bus, I had my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. But what I have
Wow. And you,
good. I'm always positive, always happy, passion.
wow.
I do. I give it 125%. Work ethic. I work harder than anybody, and I still do that today. I get up at 5:30 at 84, and then I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. I did build my mill in a lot of other companies, and since that time, obviously, I became very active in a number of companies. I have different companies in different areas. One silo is lumber manufacturing. The other silo is warehousing, distribution, and logistics. The other silo is real estate, residential, commercial, and industrial. And then the last silo is media. And so I'm actively involved in writing or as an author. I've done 5 books, and I'm working on my 6th and 7th. And then obviously I'm also a presenter. And then the other part, I'm very active on podcasting, which I believe is the new media, and only at its infancy is going to go much further. My podcast is the top 1% globally. I think we have probably close to 750,000 views on YouTube. And
Wow.
then I'm very active on podcasting, both host and guesting. And so that kind of puts me here with you.
And you summarize that in about 12 minutes. Okay, what a story, John. So I'd like to go back. I'd like to go back to the first part of your story. So you're 84 years young, and you've lived at least, let me see, I'm 35. So it's like 5 decades earlier than I have. And obviously it's a different time now, John. I mean, I can't begin to imagine like the things that you've gone so far. And when I were to think about the things that I have went through to get to where I am now, it's nothing compared to what you've gone through. So how do I even begin? So you said that you experienced PTSD, right? How did you get through that? And I'm sure you can remember vividly up until today at 5 years old, 3 years old. How'd you move past that? Hi, I'm Nick Nieras, your host of the Your Worthless podcast. Now, if these real raw stories hit home, don't wait. Please follow, like, and subscribe my Spotify and YouTube. For bite-sized inspirational reels, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Don't wait, your transformation starts today. Thank you, and bye for now.
I'm not past that. Still very much part of my life, even still today. So that in terms of reconciling it to saying no longer, that's never the case. That will always, at least in my case, stay with me. I will always remember it. I will always feel that I have an obligation to speak about it, because unfortunately there are people in this world that, and I say it respectfully, that have never experienced war and believe that if you have war, after the war is over, everything goes back to normal. No, that's not how it works. After the war is over, the rebuilding will start and lives will change. Our lives never were the same again. My parents' life were never the same again. Their relationship was never the same again. And it's still, for me, as a little boy, being part of it and seeing all of it, not only the war years, but also what it did to the family, it will always stay with you. So, and that's how precious it is. Like I believe you said, Nick, you have not been exposed to war, and that's a good thing. Always, I say that respectfully to you and others, preserve it and be proactive about it, that war is destructive. There are no winners. There are only losers. And then it takes a generation, and sometimes more than one generation, to get back to a sense of normal. Even now, every year when we have Remembrance Day, November the 11th, are you okay?
I am
You have a bit of a cold, right?
coming down with it, I think.
Yeah. In any event, and the Remembrance Day, I always make a point of talking to a number of schools about my experiences. And because here we have 2 minutes of silence and saying, why do we have 2 minutes of silence? What does it mean? Why is it so important? And I've been doing that for about 10 or 12 years, so I have an obligation to still at least share my experience with, in particular, younger people.
I am very amazed with you, John. And me starting this podcast was also because of my own journey and my own trauma, divorce, and also some toxic environment. And I would like to ask you how now you build your businesses, right? And this is your legacy. And you also mentioned you have an obligation to actually share with people what you've gone through, and so that they don't forget whatever that we have now is something that our forefathers have already built. So in your case, and you moved to different paths in your life, you're like more of a polymath, if I can say that. You've had your businesses and now you're on to media. And I'm sure you've seen the world evolve for the last 80 years. Now, where do you see us going ahead in terms of resiliency, in our attitude, how we move and how we face challenges in our lives, especially younger ones?
Yeah, so that's a very important question, Nick. And obviously for me, having gone through this all, including the other part that I did not allude to, is that I'm also wrote another book here. It's ADHD. I am ADHD, and I call it a superpower. And I wrote a book about that. So it took me a long time to reconcile as to who am I, and to be at peace with who I am. And so leaving Holland for me was not easy necessarily, but I had in my mind no choice to prove to me, first and foremost, that the educational system did not work for me. We now understand why, but I didn't then. I was already then ADHD, and I call that a superpower, as I said earlier. And so, but I thought I had no idea until I picked up a book here. I was already here in Canada for 32 years. I came here in 1965, nothing, $25.47. Started as a cleaner man, then lumber piling, and then fairly quickly I became a supervisor and then a superintendent, and fairly quickly then, within 10 years, I had started building companies. Today we have, it's not about that, but about 10 different companies, and and obviously we've done well. But even then, while I was doing all of that, it took me until 1997. Up to that point, I did not feel good about who I was. A lot of people said, hey, you're so successful and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't feel that way. And then I went into a bookstore here in Prince George, and I picked up a book. And the title of the book was Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Halliwell. I don't know why I picked it up. And it was January of 1997. I have the book in my studio where I do the podcasting from, actually, but I have the actual book that I picked up, and I would show you then the book that I bought January 1997. I opened the book and I wrote in the book in Dutch. The book was about ADHD. Dr. Halliwell has dyslexia and is ADHD. He's a doctorate and a professor. He's written 18 books, 5 about distraction, and is globally recognized as an expert in ADHD. And so when I read that book, I wrote in the inside cover in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am, January 1997. And that changed my life. So now I know who I am. So, but I already, and then initially I was ashamed of it because it implied to a certain extent that people with ADHD had a mental dysfunction of some description or another. And I obviously did not believe that, but there still was stigma attached to it. So hence I wrote the thing in Dutch. But the more I started looking at it, Googling, reading the books about it, the more I believed that it can be a superpower and it can be a benefit. And it was for me, it changed everything. But it took me 5 years until I was 72 years old. Till it was, I was 67 in 1997, 57 years old. And then I went to my doc that delivered our 2 daughters and was a personal friend in 1962. And he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we checked out, yes, I do. And so that means that from the time that I was 12 and a half years old, became a laborer in Holland with all kinds of mental issues some people suggested, or was, all the bad things about somebody that is not successful in school in grade 3 and grade 7. I kind of felt that it was really a benefit in a way. So then if you look back, I was 62 when I was diagnosed. So 50 years from the time that I was 12 and a half till I was 62 and diagnosed, I did not know who I was. But a lot of times I wonder, why am I different than others? And I was good in school and writing, but not reading. And I just have to got something here. Okay, something on my computer. So I was very good at writing, but not reading. And then the other thing that I was good at is, I had a very, very good memory. So
You do.
and so, yeah, all of that. And so that's how long it took me to become aware of it. And then the more I understood about ADHD, the more I felt I had an obligation to speak about it. And I do that, and also to write about it. And I wrote the book that I wrote is ADHD Unlocked. And so that for sure changed my life. And now a lot of times what I say to people, young people in particular, that I make presentations to, is that too many people are too preoccupied about themselves. This is not right. That's not right. My clothes is not right. This is not right. And I say to them, there is only one of you on this earth. There is no one like you on this earth other than you. So accept and reconcile who you are. If you are only one individual like this on earth, and then come to peace with who you are. And the other one is to, that part I believe is very, very important. And then from there on forward, actually for me, but it took me a long time to get there. After I got to that point in saying, who am I? Things changed for me in terms of reconciling who I was, starting to write or becoming an author, doing more presentations and speaking about issues, and my life changed. And that was something to me was very, very important.
Thank you for that, John. Now, at ADHD, it's a term that I also got to hear about it like the last couple of years, 5 years or 10 years at least. I never really understood what it meant until I looked up the meaning attention deficit hyper disorder. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And why do you say it's a superpower? Because attention deficit means you have very little attention span on certain things, and that is why you're always jumping onto different things in your life. Somebody looking at it from a third point of view would say that he or she is never going to finish what they're working on. They got their hands in other things, right? And I have been labeled as that growing up. At least, the last 15 years, I've moved to different industries as well myself, never satisfied with one, always wanting to find something what fulfills me. And I think I found one of it now, that is talking to people. So why do you say that it's a superpower? Because, it's often associated with the term or I don't know if it's a phrase, jack of all trades, master of none, right? Why is it a superpower to you?
Becoming a podcast host was a natural extension of my second act. And after spending 15 years in the corporate world, I've transitioned to helping individuals overcome challenges like navigating tough relationships, career burnout, and aligning their mission with their soul's calling. By certifying as an RTT hypnotherapist and a lifestyle coach, I've made it my mission to empower people to recreate the life they deserve and building a supportive community through my podcast. Now let me ask, are you facing challenges like struggling to reprogram your mind to attract wealth, weight issues that feel like a constant yo-yo, insomnia or restless nights from daily worries, or just a lack of confidence in public speaking? If the answer is yes, visit www.thenicknyerasholisticlifestyle.com and grab a free hypnosis audio of these common struggles. It's a sneak peek into how my coaching works. Are you feeling shy? Don't be, because I'm as real as it gets. Let's connect on Instagram and LinkedIn and start your transformation today.
I believe those are very, very interesting comments, Nick, and very appropriate. Is that I believe that ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is the wrong term. It isn't, it's not a disorder. Now, the interesting part that you may find is that I'm a podcaster as well. And for those people watching us from around the globe and the world, is that Dr. Halliwell, that wrote the book, Driven to Distraction, that I bought in 1997, he wrote it in 1993. I bought it in 1997. Up to that point, I had no idea at all what ADHD meant. No idea. When I started reading it, I said, my God, that is me. I know it. It changed my world. No question about that. There was stigma attached to it. That's why I wrote the comments in it in Dutch. The more I found out about it, the more I looked at Google, the more I started reading the books about it, I then became convinced that it is a superpower. Now, the other interesting part about it is that my podcasting, On the Brink, with John A. Brink, podcast number 203, I've done about 375 that I'm hosting. Podcast number 203 was a podcast I did with Dr. Halliwell.
Wow.
And so, and so I was interacting with Dr. I suggested, he's the expert. I lived it, but he is the expert. And I suggested that initially I thought maybe 8% of the population, I don't know, have ADHD, male, female. And then the more I looked at it, the more I heard about it, I thought it'd be much higher than that. And so in our podcast with Dr. Halliwell, I suggested that it is maybe 20%, both male and female, although females portray it differently than males do. But that then being said, he said to me, no, John, it's higher. It's at least 25. I agree with them. The other thing that I found is that globally, that in all the businesses that I've been involved in, being on boards of directors of different companies and starting several companies and interacting with several people, male and female, that are very, very successful. I believe, I suggested to Dr. Halliwell that I believe that 50% of the successful is operative, entrepreneurs and business people are ADHD. He said, no, John, at least 75 agree with him. So, and so I'm giving a presentation in the next 2 weeks to one of us here to the ADHD community. And I'm a very good presenter because I have an amazing memory and I'm a very good presenter. And everybody will remember me after I present. That didn't come automatic either. I was very self-confident but I became a speaker and I joined an organization that I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called Toastmasters in North America. Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
So up to that point, and that was in 1990, that I could interact with a couple of people and 2 or 3 people in my company, but beyond that, I was not good at interacting. And then somebody dragged me, not physically, but to a meeting of Toastmasters, and then say, "Are you going to ask me any questions?" He said, "No, you just sit and watch it," and I did. And then middle of the meeting, they said, "Hey, John, tell us all about you." I said, "I'll never go back here." But I did. I stayed there for 10 years and I became a distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest level. That part changed my life. In addition to discovering ADHD and saying that the combination of all of that, I know that for me, at least, understanding it is a superpower. It gave me the ability, even still now at 84, to be very, very active, both as an author, both as a business person, as a presenter, and all the things that I do in my life, because communication skills are critically important in life. In fact, the 5th book that I'm writing is about communication skills and success that can follow.
You're I think the 3rd person I have on my show that's actually talk about ADHD and being diagnosed with ADHD. And the more that I talk to all of you, I'm convinced that I do have the traits of an ADHD person. But I think it's a sign from the universe for me to look it up and to really read up on it. Because I've always been a confident person. Yeah. So that's available on Amazon. And is it available as an ebook?
Audible, everything. So I have dyslexia as well, but I want to do the audio myself. And it takes me a bit longer than it does everybody else, because that's one of the challenges I have as well. Still now, even, but did it stop me from being successful in business? No, in fact, it did the opposite.
Yeah. So, John,
let me make one more suggestion, is that your question was, what makes you different, and how do you know you are different, and what makes you different? Is that if I hear something or a dialogue or sitting in a classroom and there is stuff that really doesn't interest me, I block it out. I live then in another world. However, if it is something that I'm interested, then I hyper-focus. And whatever I like, I enjoy, I become very, very good at it. But first and foremost, what it does is that it took me nearly 50 years to figure out, who am I? And then the second one is that I'm just as good as anybody else. And I have this special gift called ADHD that makes me excel. And that combination of all the above, I became at peace with who I am. And that was the most important part.
I think I will begin to embrace the fact that I do have traits of an ADHD person.
Yes. And it's to benefit,
To
not a lot.
benefit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it can't, it's, you are different from the rest, right? But you different in a good way because you're achieving so much. But then some people, now I want to talk to you about what do you think about the fear of judgment?
I always look at it this way, is that people being critical
Yeah.
is indefensible because your friends know and your enemies you cannot convince. So don't waste your time dealing with people that want to be negative. And most people that, especially for people that have become successful, a lot of people have to find excuses as to why you are and they are not. And so
Yeah.
to waste time on that is not very helpful for you. And so say whatever, right?
Whatever.
Have a
Okay.
nice
Have a nice day. Okay. So, John, what are you working on currently? What's exciting for you? Any upcoming projects?
I'm very active in podcasting, as you already know. And I love it because it's the new media for the world and it's only on its infancy. I love that. And then we have a number of companies. It's a challenge right now. The economy is difficult. The U.S. economy, where we sell a lot of product into, is a challenge to deal with. So there are lots of challenges, but I enjoyed that part too. I've seen it all. I've done it all. I've had my company for my companies started them 50 years ago. So I've done that. And then the other part that I like to do is I'm going to show you another book, is this book here, Living Young, Dying Old. And that's a picture of me there. I'm the
That's
oldest.
you.
Yeah. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America at 84.
Wow.
And this book was Living Your, this is not the right one. Let me see. Yeah, this is the one. Yeah. Living Young, Dying Old. And so it's not the age, it's just a number. It's quality of life that counts. And so staying fit is very, very important for me. And then I simply do bodybuilding because I was going to the gym. Everybody gets a scary period in their life. And so for me, that happened in 2008. I was already 68 years old, didn't take care of myself quite as good as I could. Then started to go to the gym, started to look at my diet. And after I went through the gym with a trainer, it took me 6 years. And then somebody said, "Hey, John, why don't you go compete?" Me? Yeah. And so I did. And so I became in Northern BC, second bodybuilding, third in physique. That qualified me for the provincials, came in third in physique, second in bodybuilding. That qualified me for the nationals and the Arnold's. And now again, at 85, I'm going to be competing again. And the point that I'm making is simply, it gets me to the gym. I enjoy doing that. Make sure that I have a good lifestyle in terms of what I do, what I eat, very careful with my diet. So my principles are get lots of sunshine or vitamin D, sleep at least 8 to 9 hours a night, get exercise, including strength. And then the other one, diet, very, very important. And then the other one, mentally stay fit and healthy and stay active. And then realize your body, an amazing, amazing creation of nature, is extremely forgiving, but you can only abuse it for so long. And then things are giving up. In a lot of cases, these people, the last decade of their lives, they have to eat hands full of toxic medicine to fix one thing and create problems in another thing. And all of that, if you start early enough, then there's no reason that you cannot live much beyond the average age in your country and beyond. Like I say, I want to be 120.
Well, yes, John, I am rooting for you. 120. Yeah. That's another, 35 years?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Okay, John, you have businesses, and I'm sure, I don't know if you have any, failures along the way with those businesses. Now, what, as an owner or a founder of your own business, can you just give us like some 3 tips starting a business and facing challenges head on?
Yeah, so sometimes people have the inspiration or they want to start their own business, and so, but they must realize first and foremost that it's not necessarily easy. A lot of people that start business are not successful. So the
Yeah.
key is to make sure have knowledge about what do you want to do, what does the business look like, and how do you understand it. Prepare a business plan. Make sure that you are prepared, and your family is that this can be very, very demanding from time to time, both financially and physically on what you do. And if you stay the course, then there can be rewards, but it takes time to get there. And a lot of people feel that people that are successful in business, that most of the time they spend is planning holidays and bringing money to the bank. That's simply not so. But
Yeah.
if it is successful, it can be very, very rewarding.
Okay. Thank you for that advice. I needed that. That was actually for me. Okay, John, we're going to pivot to a self-worth question before I let you go. So the question for you, John, what is self-worth to you? Is it a constant state or can it fluctuate over time?
Self-worth,
Yes.
what does that mean?
Yes. What
What
does it mean to you?
the thinking of me is that my foundation is, as I said earlier, is that obviously I went through a difficult periods from time to time, but to reconcile who am I is extremely important, and to come at peace with me as an individual is that in spite of what is recognized, education and all of these other things, everything is possible. And so the foundation for me always has been attitude. I will avoid negative. If somebody wants to download negative on me, I say, get out of my way. I don't want to be part of that. That's not me. And then the other one is passion. Whatever I do, as you already noticed, I give it 125%. And then the other one is work ethic. I work harder than anybody and I enjoy it. And those combinations of all of that is what I see as my journey. And then the other part is important. Give back to the community. Stay active where you can help others and be of help. And don't make money the objective. If money is the objective for whatever you do in life, then that will not be overly rewarding. It's all the other things that are not tangible that make it worthwhile in doing the things that you do. And meeting people that at some point, even if there were only one that says that meeting you made a difference to me. That's what it's all about.
Thank you. It's like a prayer has been answered for me. Thank you, John. Like the Lord has spoken to me through you. Thank you so much for that. So, John, what is your heart's greatest wish?
Probably peace on earth would be, so that's probably my wish. If I look around the world after having been part of it as a young person of war and all the other things around it, how devastating it can be and will be. And if I look at Europe, the Middle East, and so many other countries around the world, then that by far would be the most precious thing that I believe would be my wish.
Okay. The last question for you. If you could create a quote right now for you to leave to the audience listening in the world as your legacy, what would it be?
A quote?
Yes, a quote.
I would say that it probably has something to, I can't think of something right now that comes to mind, but there are probably several of them that I use a lot is that giving back is the most important part of life. It is not making money and helping others. And for all the reasons that I said to you earlier, is that if there's only a few people in life that will say, knowing you made a difference to me.
Well, John, knowing you made a difference to me from this point forward.
I appreciate that.
So, John, how can people reach out to you and your books?
John A. and Adam or Aaron. John A. John A. Brink BRINK.com.
Okay.
Everything that we do on it, our books, available on all kinds of things, Audible and all the other things, and then and all the other things that are relating to me.
Awesome. Do you have any last messages for our listeners?
No, it's that, for you, obviously, as a podcaster, and me as a podcaster, I always think it's very important for your listeners and mine that will listen to these is to subscribe to your podcast, to share it with others, and to like it and make comments, because that will encourage you and other podcasters to do more podcasting. And it's so rewarding if people express how they liked listening to you, interviewing guests on your podcast, and very, very rewarding to you, and also helpful in ways of making suggestions. And I do that on all my podcasts, and I like to do it on places where I'm a guest.
Thank you so much for that, John. Well, that is a wrap on today's inspiring episode with John Brink. Thank you for your wisdom, John, and dedication to continue your work. For our listeners, this has been Your Worthless. Read that again. The juxtaposition of your very soul. Remember, if you've ever felt worthless, you are not alone. Your soul chose to be here, to matter. And for that reason alone, you are worthy. A huge thank you again to you, John, and to all of you for listening. Until next time, I am Nick Nyaras. Keep shining, keep growing, and always remember you are worthy and you are enough. See you in the next episode. Thank you so much, John, for your time.
Thanks, Nick.
And hi, John. Good afternoon to you. How are you?
I'm doing well, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for saying yes to be interviewed today. We finally made it happen. This is I think I wanted to interview you since last year, or at least, but then the time zones, they got in the way, but we're making it happen right now. So, John, I'd like to introduce myself formally to you and to our listeners listening for the first time. My name is Nicolette. I am the creator for the podcast titled Your Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, I'd like to introduce you, our listeners, first before we get into the conversation. So, hello everyone. We have John Brink here with us. John was born in Nazi-occupied Holland at the beginning of the Second World War. From the time he could walk, his days consisted of foraging for food with his brother and sister. Now his mother was left to raise 3 kids alone when their father was drafted into the Dutch army. They wouldn't know if he was alive until the liberation of their village by Canadian soldiers on April 12. That's in 1945. This was the exact moment John determined to make his life in Canada, the land of his heroes, only 5 years old then. Like many others who lived through that time, John has lived his entire time with the effects of PTSD resulted from being in a war zone. Wow, certainly a time that I know very little about, and that's where I'd like to learn from. Yeah. So, John, before I know we get into the nitty-gritty of the conversation and what's been said in your introduction, can you please just share with us in your words, what was it like growing up as a John Brink?
Yes, for sure, Nick.
Love this episode? Now, transformation doesn't end here. Head on to @holistic.lifestyle_with Nick. That is on my Instagram. or head on to my website www.deniaraswholisticlifestyle.com for more info on my coaching framework, which is the Worthy, Authentic, and Abundant Framework, digital guides, and my upcoming events such as retreats and master classes and workshops. Now, I also do intuitive readings where we get to check on your soul path. And if you're also wanting to check